5,000 gold pieces. The voice cut the air like distant thunder, silencing the wealthy crowd that mocked the desperate young mother. Clara clutched Owen to her chest, her honeyed eyes burning with defiance even in the face of humiliation. The hooded man who made the obscene offer stepped onto the stage, and when he lowered his hood, he revealed slitted golden eyes and scars that spoke of ancient wars. Draven, the Lycan king of the Northern Territories, did not look at her body. He looked into her eyes. The mate bond snapped in the air like electricity. But then something unexpected happened. He extended his hand not to claim his mate, but to the baby. "The pup comes with me," he declared, as if it were a universal law. The scent of wet wool and rancid fear impregnated the rotting timber walls of the Blackwood Underground auction house. Outside, the autumn storm howled with a fury that mirrored the chaos within Clara's heart. But inside that foul basement, silence was the heaviest weapon of all. Every held breath, every stifled whisper, every cruel titter, all united in a symphony of despair she knew intimately. Clara Morrison, 22 years old, clutched the small bundle to her chest with such force that her knuckles were white as bone. Owen, her 3-month-old son, slept a syrup-induced slumber, the only mercy she could buy with her last copper coins before being dragged into that hell. Drops of the cheap medicine still stained the corner of the baby's pink mouth, a painful reminder that even solace came at a price she could barely afford. She was not merely an indebted widow. She was a recessive Omega, considered the lowest caste in the entire supernatural hierarchy, sold like chattel to cover the failed wagers of a husband who had died leaving nothing but shame and a mountain of debt that grew like a hydra. Each paid bill begat 2 new ones, each requested favor transforming into a heavier chain around her neck. The auctioneer, a man with gold teeth that gleamed like counterfeit coins in the flickering lamplight, tugged at her threadbare shawl with thick, damp fingers. The sudden exposure made her shiver, not just from the damp chill, but from the way the hungry eyes of the audience devoured her. Her pallid face contrasted sharply with the dark hair that fell in disheveled waves over her shoulders, and the infant in her arms only intensified the spectacle of her ruin. Laughter erupted in the room full of affluent alphas and betas, a fiendish roar. Men clad in costly furs and women adorned with jewels worth more than Clara's entire existence observed her as if she were an exotic animal on display. Who would want a used Omega with another male's offspring? Someone bellowed from the back, his voice steeped in expensive alcohol and cheap cruelty. She probably doesn't even know who the real father is. The humiliation scorched Clara's skin like a branding iron, yet she lifted her chin. A spark of defiance kindled in her honey eyes, her first defining characteristic, a pride that years of poverty, abuse, and abandonment had failed to break. She might be sold as an object, but no one, absolutely no one, would touch Owen while blood still coursed through her veins. She was willing to tear out the throat of anyone who dared to approach her son. 10 silver pieces, a corpulent merchant offered, chuckling as he waved a beer mug. For what it's worth, she'll do. 5 coins, another retorted. Look at her, she's already broken, and with the bastard in her arms, not even worth that. Each word was a sharp blade, severing what little dignity Clara had left. She closed her eyes for a moment, deeply inhaling Owen's sour scent. Milk, clean diapers when she could afford them, and that sweet, unique fragrance all babies possess. He was her anchor amidst the storm. It was for him she was here. It was for him she would survive this. It was then that the room's temperature seemed to plummet 10 degrees in seconds. The back door creaked open ominously, ushering in a gust of icy air that carried the scent of ozone and sandalwood, as if a storm had taken human form. A hooded man entered, and his physical presence was so oppressive that conversations died instantly. The silence that followed was not merely an absence of sound. It was the weighty hush of death walking among the living. He moved with a predatory grace that made the hairs on Clara's neck prickle. Each step was calculated, each movement fluid as mercury. The dark cloak covering him seemed to absorb the light around, creating an aura of gloom that followed him like a living shadow. The auctioneer, who seconds before had laughed at another's misery, was now sweating cold. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to regain control of the situation. As I was saying, who offers more for this? Commodity? 10 silver pieces is the current bid for this Omega and her offspring. The voice that cleaved the air in response did not sound human. It was grave, resonant, imbued with an authority that made bones vibrate. 5,000 gold pieces. The shock was palpable. Glasses tumbled from numb hands. Chairs scraped as their occupants spun to stare, mouths agape without uttering a sound. No one paid 5,000 gold pieces for a pureblood queen, much less for a human widow burdened by emotional and financial baggage. The man ascended the stage with fluid movements, each step a declaration of formidable power. When he reached the top and stood before Clara, she could feel the heat radiating from him like a living furnace. There was something primal, savage, hovering just beneath the surface of his apparent humanity. As he lowered his hood, the world seemed to halt. Draven Nightshade, the Lycan king of the Northern Territories, the Winter Butcher, stood there. Gold-slit eyes, like ancient coins melted in sacred fire, fixed on her with an intensity that made her very soul contract. Scars adorned the right side of his face, maps of ancient wars etched into his bronzed skin. His dark hair cascaded to his shoulders in waves that seemed touched by darkness itself. Yet, there was something in his features that contradicted his monstrous reputation. A nobility that transcended brutality, an ancient sorrow nestled deep within those golden eyes. He was a man accustomed to bearing the weight of the world upon his shoulders, and this was reflected in his posture, upright, yet not rigid, alert, yet not tense. The mate bond snapped in the air like an invisible whip, a vibrating steel cord between them, with a force that made Clara stumble. It was like being struck by lightning that, instead of burning, warmed. Every cell of her body instantly recognized what he was to her, and what she was to him. Destiny, inevitability, completeness. But then something happened that no one, not Clara, not the bloodthirsty audience, not even Draven, expected. Instead of reaching out to claim his newly discovered mate, as centuries of Lycan tradition dictated, he turned to the infant. His gold eyes fixated on Owen with an almost religious reverence, and as he extended a hand to touch the child's rosy cheek, his fingers trembled slightly. "The pup comes with the mother," Draven declared, his voice echoing through the hall like a universal law etched in stone. It was not a question. It was not a negotiation. It was a decree of fate, pronounced by a king who rarely needed to repeat his commands. Clara felt her legs falter. It wasn't possible. The Winter Butcher, the man whose name was whispered as a nightmare in lullabies, was looking at her son as if he had found something he hadn't known he'd been searching for an entire lifetime. The journey to the Nightshade Kingdom lasted 2 weeks that stretched like 2 years in Clara's perception. The harsh winter blanketing Draven's domains mirrored the slow, painful thawing occurring within her heart. Each day in the royal carriage was a lesson in contradictions. Draven had provided the finest, wool blankets softer than clouds, warm food at regular intervals, frequent stops so she could tend to Owen in privacy. Yet he himself remained an enigma. During the day, he rode beside the carriage atop a stallion black as night, a somber figure against the snow-covered landscape. During the night, when they stopped at inns along the way, he vanished to attend to his kingdom's affairs through messenger ravens and whispered meetings. The only moment Clara saw a crack in his emotional armor was when Owen cried. No matter where Draven was or what he was doing, he appeared like a materialized shadow, checking if the child was well, if he needed anything, if the temperature was appropriate, his hands, capable of crushing skulls with ease, crushing. held Owen with a tenderness that made Clara's heart quicken in ways she was unprepared to confront. The arrival at the Obsidian Citadel brought the first turning point that would redefine Clara's expectations of her new life. The fortress rose against the gray sky like a mountain carved by angry gods, its black towers piercing the low clouds like gigantic spears. It was a place of absolute power, where every stone told a tale of conquest, and every shadow concealed centuries of secrets. Draven settled Clara in the Queen's chambers, sumptuous rooms adorned with ancient tapestries and furniture carved from exotic woods. It was a luxury she had never dreamed of, an opulence that violently contrasted with the simple home where she had lived with her late husband. But then came the surprise that left her speechless. He placed Owen's crib in her own chambers, beside the royal bed. Why? Clara asked that first night, when she found him in the royal chambers arranging small wooden dolls around the crib, toys he had specially commissioned for Owen. Draven paused, a carved night doll in his massive hands. Because a cub needs to know it is protected. And here, beside the throne, is the safest place in the entire kingdom. But Clara, scarred by years of abuse and betrayal, saw something sinister in this devotion. Her distrust was her shield, her second defining trait, a paranoia born from years of being used and discarded by men who promised protection and delivered only pain. She gazed at Draven's powerful hands holding the small doll and imagined terrifying scenarios. Bloody rituals, sacrifices, the child fattened for some macabre purpose. "You will not harm him," she stated, not a question. It was a poorly disguised threat, her voice heavy with a maternal fury that could move mountains. Draven's golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something that made her recoil. Not anger at the insinuation, but a profound sorrow, as if she had just ripped open an ancient wound that had never properly healed. "Never," he replied with a simplicity that carried the weight of a sacred oath. "This pup is more precious to me than my life, and anyone who dares to touch him will discover why they call me the Winter Butcher." The first months in the Obsidian Citadel were an emotional battlefield disguised as domestic life. Clara learned the court's routines, the royal protocols, the intricate hierarchy that governed every aspect of life within the fortress. But more than that, she learned Draven. She discovered he awoke before dawn to practice with his magic sword, his silhouette etched against the rosy sky as he fought invisible opponents with a ferocity that made the courtyard stones vibrate. She found he habitually read war reports while having breakfast, but always paused everything when Owen babbled or smiled. She learned he treated servants with respect, paid fair wages to the guards, and that his reputation for brutality stemmed from his ruthlessness with enemies and traitors, not with innocents. She discovered he possessed a private library filled with volumes on agriculture, medicine, and philosophy, not just military treatises as she had expected. But it was during a frigid pre-dawn hour, when Owen was inconsolable with colic, that Clara discovered something about Draven that would forever shift her perspective on him. She had tried everything: warmth, massage, lullabies, but the infant continued to weep with a heart-wrenching intensity. She was on the verge of despair when the door silently opened, and Draven entered, still clad only in leather breeches and an open tunic that revealed a torso crisscrossed with scars. "Let me try," he said, with a gentleness that utterly contrasted with his intimidating appearance. Clara watched him take Owen, his hands, which she had seen wield swords capable of sundering armor, transforming into instruments of boundless tenderness with the infant. Draven positioned Owen against his chest, and then something extraordinary transpired. He began to hum a lullaby in an ancient tongue Clara did not recognize. His voice, typically grave and authoritative, softened to a comforting murmur that seemed to vibrate directly from the very marrow of his bones. Owen ceased his crying almost instantly, his blue eyes fixing on Draven's face with an absolute trust that tightened Clara's throat. "What are you singing?" she asked in a whisper. "A song my mother used to sing to me before war stole my childhood," he replied, his gaze still upon Owen. "It speaks of lost pups finding their way home." It was then that he did something that shattered Clara's first true barrier. While still cradling Owen, he began to speak of himself. Not royal proclamations or decrees of war, but confessions whispered into the encroaching darkness. "I never thought I would be a father," he admitted, adjusting Owen in his arms with the practiced ease of one who had done it countless times. "An ancient curse. It had stripped me of the ability to sire heirs. For years it was a wound that never truly healed, a constant gnawing reminder that my lineage would perish with me." Clara felt her heart clench. "Why are you telling me this?" Draven looked at her over Owen's head, and she saw vulnerability in those golden eyes, a raw humanity he rarely unveiled to the world. "Because when I saw you at that auction, holding this pup as if he were your own soul, I knew. This is my son. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. And you." He paused, his voice softening further. "You are the woman who gifted me the fatherhood I believed I would never know." That night marked the beginning of a subtle yet profound shift in the dynamic between them. Clara still maintained her defenses, but she began to observe Draven with different eyes. She saw him consult ancient medical texts when Owen seemed to be developing a rash. She saw him modify his royal agenda to coincide with the baby's nap times. She saw him smile, truly smile, not merely a political movement of the lips, when Owen babbled during meals. But it was during the fevered night that Clara's gratitude transmuted into something far more perilous: hope. Owen had contracted the northern wasting sickness, an ailment that specifically attacked the delicate lungs of newborns during the colder months. The fever ascended so rapidly that Clara plunged into a frantic panic, clutching her son's tiny, feverish body as he gasped for breath. The royal healers were summoned immediately, yet when they arrived and saw a human child, they hesitated. The northern wasting sickness was treatable in Lycan pups due to their inherent resilience, but in humans, the chances were dismal. "Do something!" Clara shrieked, tears streaking her face as Owen gasped in her arms. "Your Majesty," one of the healers carefully addressed Draven, "the child is human. The northern wasting sickness, it is not meant to be survived by his kind. Perhaps it would be best to let nature take its course and—" The healer never finished his sentence. Draven's hand was at his throat before anyone could blink, lifting the man off the ground with a force that sent the other healers stumbling back in terror. "If you ever suggest letting my son die again—" Draven's voice was a roar that seemed to emanate from the very depths of hell itself. "I will show you exactly why entire armies flee at the mention of my name. Heal him. Now." What followed were the most intense 16 hours of Clara's life. The healers worked frantically, applying poultices, concocting tinctures, trying every remedy in their vast knowledge. But Owen continued to decline, his tiny body burning with fever as his breathing grew increasingly labored. It was near dawn when Draven did something that would be whispered throughout the kingdom for generations. Dismissing the healers with a gesture, he shed his shirt and lay beside Owen's small form. Then, invoking an ancient Lycan ability few possessed and even fewer were willing to wield, he began to transfer his own vital energy directly into the child. Clara watched in awe and terror as Draven's body temperature plummeted while Owen stabilized. The king's skin grew pale, then almost blue, as he surrendered his own internal warmth to fuel Owen's recovery. For hours, he maintained that connection, trembling violently as his inner fire was slowly drained to keep the infant alive. "Stop," Clara whispered when she saw Draven's lips turn blue. "You will die." "Then I die," he answered simply, never breaking the connection. A father protects his son. Always. Only when Owen's breathing finally eased and his color returned to normal did Draven permit the healers to wrap him in warmed blankets and force hot broths down his throat. He had come so perilously close to thermal shock that he could not stop shaking for hours. Clara spent that day beside his bed, holding Owen, who now slept peacefully, and studied the man who had almost perished to save her son. This was no political machination. This was no display of power. This was love in its purest, most sacrificial form. "Why?" she asked when he finally managed to speak without his teeth chattering. Draven's gaze, profound as the abyssal depths of ancient mountains, fell upon her. "Because that is what fathers do. They give everything for their children, even when those children do not share their blood." It was in that searing moment that Clara's meticulously erected emotional bulwarks truly began to fracture and crumble. This Lycan king, this alleged monster, had been willing to embrace oblivion for Owen without a breath of hesitation. How could she persist in her tenacious skepticism of his intentions? The ensuing months wove a strange tapestry of domestic normalcy, subtly punctuated by undercurrents of political strain. Clara found herself settling into a rhythm that felt profoundly surreal in its burgeoning contentment. Mornings unfolded with Owen in the sprawling gardens, where she watched him marvel at ephemeral butterflies and vibrant blooms, while Draven meticulously processed the day's correspondence. Afternoons were dedicated to immersive lessons in literature and the intricate nuances of governance, Draven treating her as an intellectual peer, worthy of comprehending the profound complexities of his rule. Never once did his voice betray condescension, nor did he ever address her with the subtle slight of an inferior due to her humble beginnings. Instead, a genuine, consuming interest gleamed in his golden eyes as he probed her perspectives, particularly concerning the unseen necessities of the common folk, a wisdom that would prove utterly invaluable in his burgeoning reign. Evenings were consecrated to the sanctity of family. Draven would return from his grave duties, shedding the weight of his ceremonial armor and the cold glint of his crown, transforming himself into Owen's simply devoted father. Clara observed him with a quiet awe as he crawled across the floors, pulling absurd faces to coax laughter from the infant, constructing elaborate towers of blocks only to watch Owen gleefully demolish them, and reading illustrated books, his deep voice morphing into a medley of distinct animal sounds. It was amidst these hallowed, intimate moments of shared family that Clara felt the companion bond coiling tighter, an invisible tether drawing her soul ever closer to his. It transcended mere physical allure, though the sight of this formidable man, softened by tender affection for his son, never failed to quicken her breath. It was something far more profound, a primal recognition, an aching sense of spiritual completeness, the undeniable, resonating truth that this, precisely this, was how life was meant to unfold. Yet this fragile, newfound peace was brutally shattered by the third profound revelation, a cataclysmic truth that would redefine every shard of what Clara believed she knew about her shrouded past. It arrived as a grim missive, borne by a midnight raven, its delivery slicing through the oppressive silence. Draven perused its contents by the flickering, unsteady glow of candlelight, his visage progressively darkening, etching lines of grim revelation into his features as he absorbed each word. When he finally finished, his gaze lifted to Clara, an inscrutable expression veiled in his golden eyes. "What is it?" she whispered, gently rocking Owen as the infant stirred restlessly in her cradling arms. "Your husband," Draven began, his voice a careful, measured rumble. He was not merely a gambler who succumbed to poor choices. He was a spy, embedded, working for the Eastern Pack. And according to this chilling intelligence report, he stole something before his demise, something profoundly sacred to our people. Clara's blood turned to ice within her veins. That's impossible. Marcus was just a merchant. He sold grains and he hid an ancient artifact somewhere among his possessions, Draven continued, his voice gentle yet firm. Our sources believe it was stitched into the baby's clothes or blankets. Clara, Owen isn't just carrying your husband's secret. He's been exposed to its magic for months. The implications struck her like a physical blow. Owen, her innocent baby, had unwittingly been carrying a stolen sacred object. Worse, he had been in contact with whatever magical properties it possessed since birth. "What does this mean?" she whispered, though a part of her already knew the answer would irrevocably alter everything. Draven moved closer, his expression serious but not hostile. "It means Owen is no longer entirely human. The artifact has been leaking ancient magic into his system for months. We are beginning to see signs of changes." As if on cue, Owen chose that moment to open his eyes. Instead of their usual brilliant blue, they flashed gold for just an instant, the unmistakable sign of emerging Lycan heritage. Clara nearly dropped him. "That's not possible. I am human. Marcus was human. Owen cannot be." "He is becoming something new," Draven said softly. "Something unprecedented. A human child transformed by ancient magic into something the Council will deem an abomination." The word hit Clara like a slap. Abomination. Her perfect innocent baby was now categorized as a monster by the very society Draven governed. "What happens now?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Draven's jaw clenched. "Now we prepare for war. Because I will not let them touch my son, no matter what laws they cite, or what traditions they invoke." The second great obstacle manifested swiftly in the form of the Council of Elders. These ancient Lycans, some old enough to remember the kingdom's founding, demanded an immediate audience with the king. Clara had been present during political meetings before, but this felt different. This felt like a tribunal. The council chamber was a circular room carved from black stone, with torches providing the only light. 12 elders sat on high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle, their eyes glinting with barely suppressed hostility when Clara entered carrying Owen. "This is highly irregular." Elder Thurston spoke first, his voice cracked with the brittle edge of age and indignation. "A human woman, present during sacred council business. This woman is my companion, and the mother of my heir," Draven replied calmly, taking his place on the throne-like chair at the head of the circle. "She has every right to be here." Elder Morrigan, the sole woman on the council, leaned forward. "That child is no heir, Draven. It is an affront to all we hold sacred. A human baby corrupted by stolen magic is not fit to carry the lineage." "Careful," Draven's voice plummeted to a dangerous whisper. "You speak of my son." "Your son," Elder Blackwood Thorn sneered. "You cannot be serious. You must take Clara immediately, plant your true seed in her womb, and rid yourself of this abomination." The temperature in the chamber seemed to plummet 20 degrees. Clara felt Owen stir in her arms, and she looked down to see his eyes flash gold again, as if he could sense the hostility directed at him even at such a tender age. "The bloodline must be preserved," Elder Thurston Finch continued, oblivious to the growing peril in Draven's stance. "Cast aside sentiment and do your duty to the kingdom." It was then that Draven unveiled the secret that would reshape everyone's understanding of the dire situation. "I cannot sire children," he stated quietly, yet his voice carried with chilling clarity through the chamber. "An ancient curse, cast by the witch we executed 50 years ago, stripped me of that ability. Owen is not merely my chosen heir, he is my only possible heir." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara stared at Draven, recalling his confession that night Owen had been racked with colic, but seeing it now in the broader context of royal succession and political imperative. Elder Morriganshaw's eyes widened. "You are barren." "I am," Draven confirmed, his gaze unwavering, "which makes Owen not just my son by choice, but by necessity. Unless this council desires the Nightshade line to die with me." The political ramifications were staggering. Without an heir, the kingdom would descend into chaos after Draven's demise. The Eastern Pack, their long-standing adversaries, would assuredly invade during a succession crisis. The southern reaches would likely rebel. Everything Draven had forged would crumble. "There are other options," Elder Blackwood-Thorne ventured cautiously. "You could name a kinsman as heir, or—" "I could," Draven conceded, a predatory glint in his golden eyes. "Or I could raise the son fate has given me to be the strongest leader this kingdom has ever known. Touched by magic or not, that boy will be prepared to rule." "The law is clear," Elder Thurston Finch insisted, his voice rigid. "Abominations cannot inherit the throne. Should the child show signs of corruption, he must be executed," Elder Morgan Shaw finished as Thurston hesitated. "It is the only way to prevent further contamination." Clara felt her world begin to collapse around her. These individuals calmly discussed her infant's murder as if he were already gone. Owen, sensing the mounting tension, began to cry. Not the usual fussing of a hungry baby, but a sound that seemed to carry supernatural harmonics. "Over my dead body," Clara declared, rising from her chair with Owen pressed protectively against her chest. "You want to kill my son? You'll have to go through me first." The elders regarded her with expressions ranging from amused condescension to open disdain. But Draven beheld her with something entirely different: pride. "The law exists for a reason," Elder Blackwood sneered. "Corrupted magic can spread, can taint our bloodlines, It can grant us power beyond our wildest dreams," Draven cut in, his voice a low growl. "What if, instead of viewing Owen as a threat, we saw him as an opportunity? What if his unique nature made him stronger than any pure-blood werewolf could ever be?" "You speak of wagering the kingdom's future on an abomination," Elder Thurston spat. "I speak of evolution," Draven countered, his conviction unyielding. "The old ways, the old prejudices, they have kept us isolated and stagnant for centuries. Perhaps it is time for something new." The debate stretched for hours, with Clara caught in the middle, holding Owen as ancient political traditions clashed with paternal love and practical necessity. It was clear the council would never willingly accept Owen as heir. Some compromise would have to be reached, or blood would be shed. But the real crisis came 2 weeks later, during what would later be known as the Night of Silver Blades. Clara had put Owen to sleep in the royal chamber, and Draven was attending a war council regarding border disputes with the Appalachian Collective. The Obsidian Citadel seemed secure, surrounded by loyal guards and protected by centuries of defensive magic. She was reading in the room adjacent to the nursery when she heard it. A sound that did not belong. A whisper of fabric against stone, too quiet for servants attending their duties. Her maternal instincts, already intensified by months of political tension, screamed danger. Moving silently to the door, she peeked into the room where Owen slept peacefully in his ornate cradle. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then shadows began to shift unnaturally, separating from the darkness to reveal figures clad in black, silver daggers glinting in their hands. Assassins. In the royal chamber, moving towards her baby. The Clara who was sold at auction months ago might have frozen in terror, screamed for help, or tried to negotiate. But the Clara who had spent months watching the most powerful man in the kingdom soften for her son, who had been trained by weapon masters in basic defense, who had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed, reacted differently. She took the silver dagger Draven had given her, ornate but perfectly balanced, meant for both protection and decoration, and entered the room like a lioness protecting her cub. "Stand away from him," she said, her voice firm despite her racing heart. The assassins spun, taken aback to find fierce resistance where they had anticipated an effortless mark. 3 they were, honed professionals who had extinguished countless lives without a flicker of remorse. They perceived a young mother, devoid of formal training, clutching a blade she likely knew not how to wield. They were about to be taught the profound error of their judgment. The first assailant lunged, fully expecting to disarm her with swift impunity. Clara sidestepped with instincts she had not known to possess, the knife carving a shallow path across his ribs as he swept past. It was not a fatal wound, yet it drew forth crimson, and seeded a tremor of shock. The second stalked her blind side, but motherhood had imbued her with an awareness that transcended normal human limitations. She felt the assault rather than saw it, pivoting to arc her blade defensively, catching him across the forearm. The silver seared like acid against his skin. These were no mere human assassins, but Lycan traitors. The third, witnessing his comrades wounded by a supposedly helpless human, succumbed to a rage that bred carelessness. He charged directly, silver blade aimed for her vital heart. Clara did not attempt to evade or parry. Instead, she dropped to her knees and thrust her dagger upward, catching him beneath the ribs in a strike that found its mark in his heart with lethal precision. He perished instantly, his body collapsing to the floor in a heap of dark fabric and spilled ichor. The remaining two assassins, now acutely aware they faced a genuine threat, began to circle her with measured caution. But Clara had forged a barrier between them and Owen's cradle, and she would not be swayed. Every maternal instinct she possessed had crystallized into lethal focus. The ensuing skirmish was brief, yet vicious. Clara possessed no formal training, but she wielded desperation, protective fury, and the silver blade that seemed to hum in her grasp. When it concluded, two assassins lay dead. One had fled through the window, and Clara stood, cloaked in blood that was not her own, still clutching the weapon that had salvaged her son's life. Thus did Draven find her upon his arrival, having raced through the obsidian citadel when guards reported a figure fleeing the royal wing. The sight that greeted him, Clara standing over fallen foes, silver blade gleaming with crimson, Owen slumbering peacefully oblivious to the carnage, nearly drove his beast into a murderous frenzy. "Are you wounded?" were his first guttural words, hands sweeping over her form to check for injury as his eyes burned with protective fury. "I am well," Clara breathed, then glanced at the dagger in her hand. "I slew them. I truly slew them." "Good," Draven rumbled fiercely, pulling her against his formidable chest, mindful not to stir Owen. "They came for our son, and you protected him. You are precisely what a queen ought to be." But the brutal aftermath of the assault unveiled a harsh truth. Traitors festered within the obsidian citadel's very walls. Someone had supplied the assassins with detailed knowledge of guard rotations, arcane defenses, and the royal chamber's layout. Trust became a luxury they could no longer afford. Draven's response was swift and unforgiving. Every member of the Citadel's staff faced interrogation under magical compulsion. Guards were rigorously rotated and tested. Any unable to account for their whereabouts during the attack were dismissed, or, based on evidence found against them, executed. Clara watched her mate transmute into the dreaded Winter Butcher, and for the first time, she truly comprehended the profound darkness he bore. He ruled not solely through raw strength, but through a chilling readiness to become a monster when exigency demanded, all to protect those he cherished. 3 betrayers were exposed. A kitchen maid, leaking intelligence to the Eastern Pack. A guard captain, ensnared by gambling debts to malevolent forces. And most shockingly, Elder Blackwood Thorne's nephew promised lavish rewards for ensuring the abomination was eradicated. Their executions were public, brutal, and orchestrated to send an unambiguous message: threaten the royal family at your peril. But the grim purge also left Draven more shadowed, more isolated, bearing the crushing weight of necessary violence that Clara perceived corroding his very soul. It was amidst this period of heightened tension and fortified security that Owen began to manifest unmistakable portents of his true change. His eyes, once innocent baby blue, now flickered between human and Lycan gold. His grip strength dramatically escalated, sufficient to accidentally shatter wooden toys designed for children twice his tender age. Most profoundly unsettling, he commenced emitting low growls when strangers approached, a sound utterly beyond any human infant's capability. The nascent alterations were initially gradual, easily dismissed as unusual but not utterly impossible. Yet, when Owen reached 9 months old, during a particularly warm spring day, he performed an act that unequivocally shattered all lingering doubt about his nature. A new servant, blissfully ignorant of stringent royal air protocols, reached for Owen as he played upon a garden blanket. The infant's retort was immediate and profoundly startling. He bared teeth undeniably inhuman, his eyes blazing full, molten gold, and unleashed a guttural warning growl that caused every Lycan within earshot to halt instantly. Clara snatched him up instantly, but the irrevocable damage was wrought. Words surged through the obsidian citadel like an unbridled wildfire. The royal heir was displaying undeniable signs of the change, at an age when such a profound metamorphosis should be biologically inconceivable. The Council of Elders demanded another meeting, this time with evidence of the corruption they had foreseen. Elder Thurston's voice trembled with righteous fury as he presented his ultimatum. "The child has been corrupted by stolen magic," he declared, presenting ancient texts that delineated the laws regarding magical contamination. "According to sacred law, all abominations must be purified by fire to prevent further spread of corruption." "You want to burn my son alive," Draven said, his voice deadly calm, "because he is developing abilities that make him stronger than your weak purebloods." "The law is clear," Elder Morrigan insisted. "No exception has ever been made. No child showing premature change has been allowed to live." "Then perhaps it is time to change the law," Clara spoke, standing beside Draven's throne with Owen in her arms. "Just because something hasn't been done before does not mean it shouldn't be done now." Elder Blackwood, still smarting from the execution of his nephew, sneered at her. "A human questioning sacred Lycan law. Your arrogance knows no bounds." "My arrogance?" Clara's voice rose with rage she could no longer contain. "You want to murder a baby because he doesn't fit your narrow definitions of acceptable. Who is truly being arrogant here?" But the elders were not moved by emotional pleas. They had the weight of tradition and religious law behind them, and they intended to use both to force Draven's compliance. "You have until the next full moon to comply with the purification demand," Elder Thurston formally announced. "Should you refuse, the council will be forced to act independently to preserve the spiritual integrity of the kingdom." It was a thinly veiled ultimatum. If Draven would not execute Owen, they would do it for him. They had enough political support among noble houses to potentially succeed in their rebellion. That night, Draven sat in his office staring at ancient law books while Owen slept in his crib nearby. Clara found him there near dawn, still reading, surrounded by texts all proclaiming the same truth. Magical corruption must be eliminated. "There has to be another way," she said quietly, settling into the chair opposite his desk. "According to every legal precedent, every religious text, every sacred law, there isn't," Draven replied, without lifting his eyes from his reading. "The demand for purification has no exceptions, no exemptions, no alternative interpretations." "Then we fight," Clara said simply. "If the law is wrong, we change it. If the council does not listen to reason, we will make them listen." Draven finally looked up, a profound weariness etched into his golden eyes. "You speak of civil war, Clara. I'd be asking my people to choose between their king and sacred tenets. Many would choose tradition over loyalty. And many would choose love over fear," she countered, her voice a steel cord. "Draven, look at our son. Is there anything corrupted or malign about what he is becoming? Or is he merely new?" That question would prove prophetic in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. The answer came as divine intervention during what would forever be remembered as the trial of sacred fire. The ceremony was ancient, seldom enacted, designed to resolve intractable disputes. Representatives presented cases before the sacred circle, and the gods themselves rendered judgment through signs and omens. Draven invoked this right, using his prerogative as king to demand an audience before Owen could be condemned. It was a desperate gambit, the only legal avenue to challenge the council's authority. The sacred circle lay in the obsidian citadel's deepest caverns, predating the structure above. Ancient symbols, etched into every surface, pulsed with faint bioluminescence, making the stone seem to breathe. Representatives from each house attended, alongside high priests and priestesses who remembered the gods' full pronouncements. Draven stood at the circle's heart, holding Owen while Clara remained by his side. The infant, blissfully unaware of the gravity, gurgled joyfully, his tiny hands reaching for the glowing symbols. "I invoke the right of divine judgment," Draven formally announced, his voice reverberating through the cavern's depths. "Let the gods themselves decide my son's fate." Elder Thurston Finch stepped forward as the principal accuser. "The law is clear, the taint evident. We call for purifying fire to cleanse the lineage, to stave off further corruption." "I ask for mercy," Draven responded, his gaze unwavering. "Not just for my son, but for the profound possibility that what we perceive as corruption might be evolution, that what we fear as change could be burgeoning growth." The ritual involved archaic invocations, burning sacred herbs, and prayers in languages so ancient only the priests recalled their significances. For a grueling hour, nothing stirred save ceremonial posturing and formal recitations of law. Then Owen began to ignite. It commenced as a faint luminescence around his skin, barely perceptible in the cavern's dim glow. But it swelled, growing brighter, until the infant radiated a soft, golden effulgence that illuminated the chamber. The ancient symbols on the walls responded, bursting into vibrant life with their own nascent radiance, as if acknowledging something profoundly sacred in the child's presence. Yet, that was not the most shattering part. As Owen's radiance intensified, images coalesced within the light, visions only divine magic could produce. They beheld a great silver and gold wolf, standing protectively over a pack of thousands. They witnessed battles waged with wisdom and compassion, not claw and fury. They saw a kingdom not merely of Lycans, but of all supernatural beings living in harmony. And through it all, they saw Owen, grown to adulthood yet unmistakably the same child, leading with a strength born not of pure blood, but from the union of human heart and Lycan might. The vision endured but mere moments. Yet, as it vanished, the silence in the sacred circle was absolute. Even Elder Thurston appeared shaken to his core, his former certainty usurped by awe and bewilderment. High Priestess Morwen, the kingdom's oldest religious authority, stepped forward, tears tracing paths down her wizened cheeks. "The signs are clear," she announced, with a voice that carried divine authority. "This child is not tainted. He is blessed by Selenia, the lost goddess of orphans and outcasts. The magic within him is not stolen power forged into venom, but divine boon made manifest." The revelation sent tremors of shock through the assembled nobles. Selenia had been deemed lost for centuries, her worship forsaken as the kingdom fixated on more belligerent deities. To learn she had been watching, waiting, and chosen to bless a half-human child shattered centuries of religious doctrine. "The goddess speaks through the child," High Priestess Morwen continued. "He stands under her protection, and any who seek to harm him shall face her wrath." Elder Thurston attempted to protest. "But the law yet stands. Magical contamination." "It is not what we bear witness to here," the High Priestess cut him short. "This is divine benediction, not corruption. The law does not apply to the gods chosen." The political implications were breathtaking. Owen was not merely legally protected from execution, he was now considered religiously sacrosanct. To touch him would be not only treason, but sacrilege. But the peace this brought was temporary. The Eastern Pact, learning of the trial's outcome, perceived opportunity in the kingdom's religious upheaval. If Draven was distracted by divine politics, protecting a controversial heir, it could be the opportune moment to strike. The attack came at dawn 3 days later, not as a formal declaration of war, but as a massive assault designed to capture the blessed child for their own purposes. If they could not slay Owen to eliminate a future threat, they would steal him to secure a future ally. Clara awoke to the jarring din of battle cries and clashing steel reverberating through the citadel's ancient corridors. Draven had already departed, summoned hours prior by reports of border skirmishes, patently diversions designed to isolate him from his family. She was alone with Owen when the Eastern Pack breached the citadel's inner defenses. Yet the Clara facing this threat was not the terrified young mother who slew assassins mere months prior. She had trained with weapon masters, studied defensive magic, and crucially, learned to harness the companion bond that linked her to Draven. Even from afar, she could draw upon his strength, his reflexes, his predatory instincts. The first wave of attackers bursting through her chamber door met no helpless victim, but a woman moving with Lycan speed despite her human lineage. The silver daggers Draven had gifted her sang through the air, finding armor gaps with a precision that should have been impossible for one without supernatural senses. But their numbers were legion, and still they came. Clara fought with desperate fury, shielding Owen, who lay nested within his magic protective circle, a precaution Draven had mandated after the assassination attempt. The infant was secure from direct assault, but if Clara fell, they would have the time to shatter the barrier. Then, something truly extraordinary transpired. As Clara's strength began to wane, and the ring of foes tightened around her, Owen began to weep. Not the common distress of a frightened babe, but something far deeper, more powerfully potent. His cries carried harmonics vibrating in the very bones of every supernatural being in the citadel. Yet more profoundly, they bore a summons echoing through the companion bond that inextricably linked Clara to Draven, amplified by Owen's burgeoning magical abilities. Miles distant, leading a counter-assault against the diversionary force, Draven felt that summons strike him like a physical blow. The knowledge his family faced mortal peril ignited a berserker rage his enemies were ill-equipped to meet. He carved through their ranks like a force of nature, racing back to the citadel with inhuman speed. Yet even at impossible speeds, he might not arrive in time. Owen's protective circle began fracturing under sustained magical assault, and Clara bled from multiple grievous wounds despite her fierce resilience. It was then, the most staggering revelation of all transpired. As Clara's despair crested, and Owen's cries reached a crescendo, something awakened within her, something that had lain dormant her entire life. Months of exposure to Lycan magic, the companion bond with Draven, and most importantly, close contact with Owen's divine blessing had activated a heritage she never knew she possessed. Clara's eyes shone silver, not golden like a werewolf, but silver like moonlight on water. Power surged through her veins like liquid starlight, and suddenly the attacking wolves found themselves facing not a desperate human mother, but something far more perilous. She was not human. She had never been human. She was descended from the moon-touched, a lineage of Lycan healers and seers believed extinct for 3 centuries. Her heritage had been hidden so profoundly that even she hadn't known. But the combination of magical exposure and maternal desperation had awakened abilities that made her one of the kingdom's most formidable beings. The silver light emanating from her skin not only illuminated the chamber, it dominated the minds of her attackers. One by one, they ceased their struggle, their eyes glazing over as Clara's newfound power seized control of their will. She did not kill them. She simply commanded them to sleep, and they collapsed where they stood. When Draven finally arrived, prepared to fight through dozens of foes to reach his family, he found Clara standing over unconscious attackers, while Owen clapped happily from his protective circle. The silver glow around her was fading, but the power he sensed emanating from her was unmistakable. "What happened?" he asked, though a part of him already suspected the answer. "I remembered who I was," Clara replied, looking at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "Or perhaps I became who I was always destined to be." The aftermath of the assault brought revelations that altered everything. Under magical questioning, the captured Eastern Wolves revealed the attack had not been random. Their pack leaders had received intelligence from someone within Draven's kingdom, someone who knew about Owen's blessing and intended to exploit the child's power for their own nefarious ends. But even more shocking was the traitor's identity. Lord Aldrich, the man who had originally sold Clara's debt to the auction house. He hadn't merely been collecting payment for her husband's gambling losses. He had been orchestrating a long-term scheme to seize Owen from the very beginning. Clara's deceased husband, Marcus Reed, wasn't a random artifact thief. Lord Aldrich Vance had deliberately recruited him, seducing him with promises of power and wealth to infiltrate the Appalachian Collective's treasury. The scheme: steal the artifact, empower Marcus into a superior spy, then infiltrate the Northern Kingdom. Marcus, however, betrayed them. Instead of delivering the artifact to Aldrich, he hid it in his infant's garments, faking his demise to vanish with his family and the magical treasure. His death wasn't accidental or from creditors, but an execution ordered by Aldrich Vance for his treachery. "He was trying to protect you," Draven Nightshade explained to Clara in his study, Owen Nightshade cooing between them. "In his flawed way, your husband tried to grant you and Owen a better life." Clara felt complex emotions: fury at Marcus for ensnaring their innocent child in peril, grief for the man she knew. Still, a strange gratitude remained for his final protective act, not pure self-interest. "And now?" she inquired. "Lord Aldrich Vance remains. He will try again." "No." Draven's voice carried a somber promise. "I am calling for a formal royal hunt. By tomorrow night, Lord Aldrich Vance and every conspirator will be dead. The royal hunt, an ancient, brutal practice, was reserved for direct threats to the royal lineage. Mercilessly culminating in the target's death, it deterred future conspiracies against the kingdom." Clara did not attempt to dissuade Draven. She had witnessed, lost, and risked too much to believe in mercy for anyone using her child as a political pawn. Beyond justice, larger matters demanded attention. Clara's awakened moon-touched heritage dramatically shifted the political landscape. She was now one of the kingdom's most potent magical practitioners. Owen, more than a blessed child, was the scion of extraordinary lineages: human heart, werewolf strength, divine favor, and ancient magic. More significantly, they were family. Not by law, convenience, or political necessity, but by choice, by love, by bonds forged through months of confronting impossible challenges together. Their union's formal recognition came during the grandest spring celebration, the Festival of New Beginnings. Instead of a private ceremony, Draven Nightshade chose to make their marriage a public declaration of the new era dawning within his kingdom. Clara moved through a corridor garlanded with luminous white blossoms, cradling Owen, who babbled with rapturous excitement at the kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. She was clad in a midnight silver and sapphire gown that seemed to ensnare starlight, crowned with moonstones, a luminous homage to her newly awakened moon-touched heritage, and bearing the twin silver daggers, emblems of her strength. Yet, the most profound moment unfurled not amidst formal vows, but in the sacred quiet that followed, during the rite of family adoption that would irrevocably seal Owen's destiny as heir. Draven knelt at the heart of the ceremonial circle, Clara poised beside him, Owen nestled securely in her arms. With a blade sanctified by High Priestess Morwen Stone, he cut his palm, allowing potent blood to drip into a gleaming silver chalice. Then, with a tenderness that fractured the air, he pricked Owen's minuscule digit, mingling their lifeblood within the ancient vessel. By shared blood, by choice made, by love freely given, Draven's voice, a rumble of command, resonated with hallowed ancient words. I claim this child as irrevocably mine, not because he sprang from my flesh, but because he chose my heart as his sanctuary. From this consecrated day forward, he is Owen Nightshade, Prince of the Northern Kingdom, heir to all I possess and all I am." Owen, as if privy to the profound gravity of the moment, stretched out a tiny hand and grasped Draven's finger with astonishing strength. Where their skin touched, silver and golden light interwove, forging a shimmering, visible tether that would bind them, spirit and essence, for all their days. The throng erupted in a thunderous acclamation, but Clara's gaze remained riveted solely upon her nascent family. Draven, the feared winter butcher, who had irrevocably proven that truest strength lay in choosing love over law when the two clashed with destiny. Owen, her miraculous child, who had weathered assassination attempts, arcane transformation, and political maelstrom to emerge not cursed, but divinely blessed. And she herself, no longer the desperate widow bartered at auction, but a queen who had unearthed a primal power she never knew she possessed. The ensuing celebration endured for 3 sun-drenched days, with representatives from allied kingdoms arriving to witness the unprecedented convergence and to recognize the nascent prince. But the moment Clara most profoundly cherished arrived on the final night, when the last dignitaries had departed, and they were finally cocooned in the solitude of their private chambers. Owen lay sleeping peacefully in his crib, surrounded by trinkets and tributes from well-meaning well-wishers, his breath a steady, healthy rhythm. Draven sat in a nearby chair, still wearing his ornate ceremonial crown, but his regal vestments exchanged for the softened comfort of sleep garments. "Do you ever find yourself haunted by regret?" Clara asked, settling onto his lap with the innate grace of a woman who had finally found her immutable sanctuary. "For all you have sacrificed, for every ancient law you have defied, for the myriad enemies you have forged." Draven wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close enough to rest his chin atop her head. "My only regret is that it took a liar and a thief to bring you to me. I wish your path here had been easier." "If it had been easier, I might not have been strong enough to stay," Clara countered. "Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the best destinations." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep and listening to the sounds of their kingdom settling into a peaceful night. 3 lives, once shattered by loss, betrayal, and circumstance, had been rebuilt into something stronger than any could have achieved alone. Owen stirred, making the tiny sounds babies utter in dreams. His eyes opened for just a moment, flashing gold in the candlelight, and he smiled at his parents before drifting back to sleep. "He will be extraordinary," Clara whispered. "He already is," Draven replied. "But then again, so is his mother." Clara smiled, thinking of the desperate woman who had clutched her baby in a filthy auction house only months prior. That woman had been willing to die for her son, but she had never imagined living for something greater. Now she was queen of the Northern Kingdom, companion to a man who redefined strength with kindness, mother to a child blessed by Selenia, the lost goddess of orphans and outcasts, heir to magical abilities she was only just beginning to grasp. She had a family worth protecting, a kingdom worth serving, and a future worth forging. As dawn approached, painting the windows with soft golden light, Clara reflected on their journey. Owen's quiet breath, Draven's strong heartbeat against her back, the hearth's warmth. These simple moments were the true victory, not the political maneuvers, magical revelations, or dramatic battles, but this, a family choosing each other daily, building beauty from the broken past. The future would bring new challenges. Other enemies would seek to exploit Owen's unique nature. Political crises would test their unity, and law and love would conflict. But they would face these together, as they had faced everything else, with courage, wisdom, and the unwavering knowledge that they had chosen each other not out of obligation, but desire. In the end, that choice, to love, protect, and build instead of destroy, was the most powerful magic of all. If this saga of a desperate mother discovering an unexpected love with a powerful king who proved true strength lies in choosing family over tradition has seized your spirit, subscribe for more epic Lycan King romances. Strike the hallowed bell to ensure you never miss a tale of fated companions defying destiny's decree, of children bearing divine blessings, and of families forged not by blood, but by unyielding bonds of love. Remember, the gravest battles are not waged with claws and fangs, but within valiant hearts brave enough to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and progressive traditions over ancient prejudices.